You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
For the community, by the community.
Hi, and thank you for joining Two Guys and a Lot of Wine on a very special edition. It's our 50th show, and this is our Tour de France, Part 2, in recognition of Jim's trip to France. Welcome back, Jim.
It's good to be back, although let me tell you, with all the great food and great wine I ate over there, I could stay there for another month.
Well, I know last time you were here, we did the show, it was a French-themed show. We were talking about your trip, and there was a whole lot going on. And I know we're going to be drinking French wines all tonight, and we're going to be hearing about your trip. And there's just so much to squeeze in on our 5th year show. Well into our 5th year doing this show.
I can't believe it's been 5 years, 50 episodes.
And I'm glad we're doing
run.
French wine because it's my favorite.
Yep. We got some great stuff lined up for tonight. We're going back to Alsace. That was the French wines that we drank on our last episode.
Which were all phenomenal.
They were. And we've got another great one. I've actually had it before, so I can tell you, it's fantastic.
Well, I'm just blown away, first of all, by the stories you're going to be telling us about your trip. And for the first time on the show, I've actually tasted the wine instead of just either getting it through my wine club or going blind. So I've tasted my 2 wines tonight. Jim is going in blind, though, tonight.
I have not tasted either of the wines I brought tonight.
That never happens.
Yes, I've never done that before. So,
well, I'm still excited.
We're swapping roles.
Yeah, let's get right into the first rosé so we can see what this is all about.
Okay, the first rosé we have is from Nîmes. Nîmes is a small village in the southern part of the Rhone Valley. The Rhone is actually right near the coast. It's near Avignon and Marseille, which is the southern part of France. The Rhone Valley has been growing wine for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. They say the ancient Greeks actually had a lot of wine coming from that region. So this is some of the oldest recorded wine growing regions in the world.
Interesting.
And what we're tasting tonight is a blend. It's a Grenache Syrah blend, 70% Grenache, 70% Syrah, and 30% Grenache.
And as our viewers know, that me and Jim love rosés, and they're actually really popular now. They really have come on their own, and people are buying them. And I still think French rosés are some of the best.
They are, and I go to a rosé tasting every year in Boston now, and have 40 or 50 rosés in one night, and the French stuff is always coming out on top. So
40 or 50.
It's a big crowd. Everybody brings a bottle. You get a couple of duplicates, but you're drinking something new every glass.
I've always thought that when you're drinking, because I of course do wine tastings and we do wine tastings together, but you do them at a more larger scale. When you're drinking that many rosés, did they sort of all blend in after a while?
They can after a while. That's why you need to cleanse your palate. You and I talked about this on a previous episode also. Eat a cracker in between sips of wine.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
There's a special cracker that I really enjoy that's made specifically for wine tasting. It gets really powdery in the mouth. It dries out the mouth completely. It gets rid of any kind of residual flavor you might have from the previous glass of wine, and then gives you a neutral palate to try the next bottle.
Now you can see on camera, this is a lighter rosé right off the bat. So as you're seeing the two on camera, the one that I brought in is going to be a little darker. This is a little lighter. So
that's why I love doing rosé tastings where you try a whole bunch together. So you can kind of judge the color. Some winemakers want a very subtle color. Other winemakers want to have a darker color. The particular bottle we're trying right now from Nîmes, they leave the skin in contact with the juice for about 4 hours, and then they pull it out. So that's why it's so subtle compared to the one you brought. And the one you brought probably had 12, 16 hours.
I believe so from what my research was. And I'm just curious with the alcohol content. I know we've been talking about that a lot.
I think mine's 12.5%.
Yeah, so that also goes to show you that this isn't always the case. A lighter color rosé might be a little bit lower in alcohol. The darker one, at least the one I brought in, is at 13.5, which is kind of high for what I would consider a rosé.
Yeah, usually, it's a lighter style wine, so it's going to have a lower alcohol content.
So my first sip, this was delicious.
It's fantastic. I love it too. And I'm trying it blind. My first time with this, but you can't go wrong with French wine.
Well, this show will be airing I guess, next month in July, right?
July.
So it's still summer. I mean, you can see I'm still tan. Jim still has some French color. And this is a perfect complement to any picnic table or any party you might be having.
And that's why you and I love rosé so much, is you spend so much time outdoors in the summertime. You want to have a wine that you can chill. Rosés are great at a low temperature. 52 degrees is the recommended serving temperature for this bottle. So you want to get it really cold.
Yeah, and a good rosé could still hold its own even if it's room temperature, in my opinion.
Yeah, this one actually has warmed up a little bit since I brought it down here from Boston, but it's still drinking fantastic.
Yeah. You can see how fantastic it was for me because mine's already gone. So to me, that's an epitome of a good rosé. Easy to drink, nice and dry, doesn't overwhelm your palate, and it's perfect for just sitting on the deck, porch, your boat, and just enjoying yourself. So.
And this, even though it's a rosé, this will hold up to food. Some of the recommended pairings for this are grilled ribs or grilled red bell peppers. So it's not just a wine you would have on its own. This can hold up to some.
It's not.
Food.
We usually wait till after the show, but I actually brought in some pepper, some sausages, both mild and spicy, because I knew we'd be having some rosés, and those would also be a good pairing for a rosé. So, Jim, for your blind tasting, thumbs up, man.
I'm giving it a thumbs up also.
Awesome. Very good.
Way to go, Nîmes.
We'll get into whether you went to Nîmes when you were in your French trip in a moment. So mine is a Masti Brassades. Jim's French is much better than mine.
Yeah, but my eyesight's horrible.
Oh, well, let's try the bigger version. It's a Mostes Brassades.
Brassade.
Brassade, yes. And it's a Costière de Nîmes also.
Oh, all right. So
yes.
This is another Rhone style.
It is another Rhone style. And right off the bat, you can see the darker color. And the darker color rosés always get some people nervous because they automatically think it's going to be overly sweet.
Exactly, yeah. That's the assumption I had when I first started drinking rosé also. I thought it's going to be thick, it's going to be heavy, it's going to be syrupy, and that's usually not the case.
It's not only not the case, it's a very beautiful, subtle wine in general.
Now this does have more body than the first wine we tried.
It's got a little bit more of a bite in the aftertaste. This particular wine, it's not a huge vineyard. They make a lot of different wines at this location. This one, their 2010 version, actually was rated 91 points. This is a 2014, I believe. This was an 87 or 88er. But in general, you're always going to get a good rosé from these guys. And it's the kind of rosé, because it is a little heavier. Some people might think this is a better sipper. It's a slower sipper. Probably goes better with more food pairings than the food one would.
I was just going to say, I would prefer to drink this with some food, have some food with this, rather than just sip it on its own.
Now, you said, did you get to Nîmes on your trip?
Not on this trip. I've been to Nîmes in the past. I went to France 30 years ago for the first time, and I toured most of the country. So I was in Nîmes, I was in Avignon, I was in Marseille. That's all down in the southern part of the country. I was also up north in Paris.
I will say, though, when Jim and Beth were on that trip, I didn't get any packages showing up on my doorstep that were full with wine saying, "Bob, can you sign for this for me?" It didn't happen. Jim.
I should have shipped something over.
I was hoping, but that's all right. There's always another trip. But anyways, back to the wine. The two that we've just tasted, I think I like yours a little bit better, only because it's drier. And I'm a bigger proponent of a drier rosé than a sweeter rosé.
And that's why we tasted these right before the show, just to see what order to put them in. That's why we put the first one where it is because it is a little drier. You want to move dry to sweet when you're doing a tasting like this.
And what also is interesting? We've never done two shows consecutively of the same varietal. I think this is the first time we've done two French shows back to back.
You're right. Yeah, usually we really try and change things up here and give you a good plethora of wines to view along with and drink along with us.
Now, don't think that we're getting snuffy or stuffy like, with the French guy wines now. We're still two guys and a lot of all kinds of wines. But I think because of your trip and the fact that so many good French whites go great in the summertime, I think I'm enjoying doing another French themed show.
And I wanted to talk again about the trip to France and just what an amazing difference it is going there today versus 30 years ago. There's so many signs that are in English now and French. There's so many people who will speak English to you. You turn on the radio, you hear American pop songs.
Really?
You go, yeah. I was listening. I did a lot of driving tours and had the radio on, and I couldn't believe how many American songs I heard. Whereas 30 years ago, it was all French songs all the time.
So they have tried to tone it down a little bit.
I don't think that's a conscious effort on their part. I think this is just globalization creeping in. But it's much easier as a tourist to navigate through Paris now. I remember when I first went there, I'd had 4 years of French classes in high school and didn't really learn a whole lot of French in the classroom. And it wasn't until I was immersed in the French culture and had to speak it to survive that I really learned how to speak French. And today, you go there, restaurant menus are in English.
That's a big one right there, because I know I've heard in the past, I've also spent time in Europe, but not France, that a lot of times the menus are in the native language. And you just don't know what you're eating.
Right.
But
you just point at something and they bring it out, right?
Well, you know what that means? That's the dollar sign. That's good.
Yeah.
That's the dollar sign.
Yeah.
They want people to be able to order what they want and what they're going to like. And I think that's a big plus.
Well, I think it's the French culture finally coming around to the fact that tourism is a big part of their country's economy, and they're going to have to cater to the English-speaking population that's coming there.
I agree.
But it's easier with today's technology to get around too. You think of all the applications you have on your smartphone. My wife was constantly looking up restaurants on Yelp for places for us to eat. So we had great food the entire time we were there because she was always looking at the customer ratings, and so if something got 4 stars or higher, she was going to let us eat there, and if it was lower than that, she said, keep going.
I say this all the time, but it's the globalization of not only the wine culture, but now even taking a trip like you did. The same apps that you would use here, you can use in France and most European countries.
Yeah.
If not all of them,
Yep.
really.
No, we had a Garmin with us also, and we were navigating. We drove for 3 days to 3 different areas. We went to the Champagne area, we went to Versailles, we went to Giverny, and used the Garmin and didn't have any problems driving around at all. And 30 years ago, I would have been terrified to drive. So it's amazing how much easier it is to get around now with all these different technological devices, and with people speaking more English over there.
Now, I've noticed one thing already tonight, that Jim is actually drinking slower than he normally does, and my wine is already gone.
I had so much to tell you about this trip, Bob. I couldn't stop talking.
But the thing that always interests me about French wines is, we always talk about terroir, more so with the reds. But I think even in a rosé, and I at least know the one that I have coming up, you'll know that's a French wine right off the bat. I mean, there's no question that the Gentil Hugo is. You taste that blind, you're gonna say, yeah, that's a French white.
Well, let's go ahead and try it.
We're gonna absolutely.
This is from Alsace.
And this is also from the Wilm vineyard, isn't it? I believe.
No, this is.
Oh, it is. That's right.
This is from Hugel.
This is Hugel. Yes, we didn't get a chance to try this on the last show because you didn't bring this one. You said you had.
I've had this before, and I wanted to kind of work it into that last show, but we just had such a huge lineup from the Wilm family that we didn't have room for the Hugel. But this is a great wine. It's 6 different grapes that they grow in Alsace. It's Gewürztraminer, it's Riesling, it's Pinot Gris, it's I believe Pinot Blanc, and
the other one escapes me.
I'm missing 2 others. Muscat and Sylvaner.
Yeah. And
So-
you would think blending 6 different grape varietals would be like all over the place and it wouldn't work.
It
It
should be a
works.
nightmare. But this is a fantastic white. I fell in love with it the first moment I sipped it. And the gentleman who was pouring it for me actually made the comment, if you're traveling to France anytime soon, I can set up a private tour for you of the vineyard. And I got really excited about that and thought, I'm going to be in Paris in a couple of weeks. Let's do that. But it turns out, Alsace is a 6-hour car ride from Paris or a 4-hour train ride, so it's not a day trip.
Yeah.
But if you can travel there and spend the night or spend a couple of nights, there are a lot of great wineries in the region.
Well, from my memory, and like I said, I tasted this just recently, not recently, a couple months back, and I bought a couple bottles. Because what I notice about this particular wine is when you take your first sip, it is a very subtle explosion of flavor in your mouth. And as it sort of breaks down, as it sort of fills your palate, you can taste the intricate details, I think, of some of the grapes, which you can't always say for a lot of whites. A lot of whites, you might be able to enjoy the flavor, but this one is very intricate.
It's very complex, yes, and I would agree with you completely. You take a sip of it, and it takes its time opening up. It doesn't reveal itself immediately, and the finish lasts forever, and it's still changing in my mouth right now.
It is, even though this is a little warmer because obviously this stuff's been sitting out for a short time. I'd probably want this a little bit colder, but even at this temperature, I still really am enjoying the flavor.
It's fantastic, and it's just goes back to why I fell in love with it when I first had it. It's so complex, and it's constantly challenging your palate with some new flavor that's thrown at you.
We've been so excited about talking about our wines tonight. We didn't even talk about price points. The first one that you brought in, the
12
Chateau,
to $15 retail.
phenomenal price
Yeah.
for a good rosé. Mine, I think, is about in the same price range between 11 and 13.99. Another good price point. There are rosés that can be very pricey. I've actually never had a rosé that costs more than $25.
You shouldn't pay more than $25 for a rosé. I don't. You and I don't like to pay more than $20 for any kind of wine, but rosés especially, they're usually, you're going to find them in the $10 to $15 range. That's what you should be spending for a rosé.
The Hugel, a little bit higher. I think it's $17.99, which to me is still a steal.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's worth it.
It's one of those wines where you wouldn't be disappointed even if you were to you were in a restaurant and you paid $50 for it because you wanted a particular white for your meal. I still think you would enjoy it a lot. So, three thumbs up all the way.
Yeah, fantastic. And some good food pairings for the Hugel are fish. A lot of different fish dishes go with this. Baked fish, grilled fish in a cream sauce.
Which, by the way, you haven't made in a while for me. You haven't made a good fish dish.
I gotta cook some fish for you now, huh?
Actually, did you have a lot of fish in France?
I did. I ate quite a few different fish dishes. I had frog legs. I had escargot. Frog legs, actually, and I've had those before, but they really do taste just like chicken.
Now, a frog leg technically isn't a fish dish. That would be is it a reptile dish?
I was just, I was naming off some of the more exotic foods that I had, but
actually, it's a good question.
That's an amphibian dish.
It's an amphibian dish. Okay, that's better. And the oysters technically that's shellfish, right?
Yep. And then escargot that's not even a fish.
Did it extend your amorous behavior throughout the trip after eating some of that?
Let me tell you, I had a smile on my face after the very first meal, and it didn't go away for the entire week.
I can believe that.
The French just do food better.
Yeah.
The bread tastes better, the cheese tastes better, the chocolate tastes better, and of course the wine tastes better. And I think that's because they use all natural ingredients. They bake everything fresh, so like the bread was baked that morning. They don't use preservatives. They don't use any kind of artificial colors or flavors. The wine doesn't have sulfites over there. They have to add that to ship it over here.
That's one of the things I thank you for clicking my switch because I wanted to ask about the sulfite issue.
The wine just tasted so much better over there. And it's
so in general, they do not use sulfites at all.
No. And it makes a huge difference.
They say that. But we've actually never done a tasting of sulfites versus non-sulfites, which is kind of hard to do because you have to know how to buy the wine because a lot of times you can't buy it.
You can find wines here in the United States that don't have sulfites. Usually it's an organic wine, and so they use that whole organic growth process, or sometimes it's biodynamic, and those get a little funky usually. You get kind of a barnyard characteristic with those. I haven't fallen in love with with a lot of the organic wines that I've tried. And I've tried quite a few. There were a couple of standouts, but for the most part, they don't appeal to my palate.
Yeah, I can understand that.
But if sulfites do concern you, there are wines you can buy here in the United States that don't have sulfites.
Normally that section is very small, though.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Which is a detriment because if people want to try a non-sulfite wine, you're very limited to what your selection
you really have to go out of your way to find it. Some stores don't even carry them.
I just tried a little piece of sausage with this white, and it still worked. It still actually worked, which I didn't think it would with this many grape varieties in it. So,
well, it's Riesling goes well with spicy foods, so that's probably part of what made that pairing work.
And I also want to say that for people that are watching the show, we've done a lot of shows on wine. These wines that you're seeing tonight, I think, like I said, I want to emphasize that they are really good summer wines. They're not heavy. They're not like a Chardonnay buttery, even though people like Chardonnay wines. These, to me, are if you're going to have a good party, 6, 7, 8, 12 people, this is what you want in your picnic. This is what you want on your table. These wines right here, this particular varietal of wines.
And they're impressive. These are not the bland everyday wines. The manufacturers made 8 million cases of. These are standouts.
There's a place for barefoot and bubbly, but you know what? Sometimes you just want to have, a little bit highbrow, and you want to wear a little bit nicer shirt and say, this is going to be a French evening tonight.
This makes us sound a little snobby now, doesn't it?
Every once in a while, a little snob factor works. So, Jim, so far, 3 thumbs up all the way across the board.
Great. Well, the French know what they're doing.
They do.
All right. Last up, this is Vouvray. Now, Vouvray is in the Loire Valley, which is just west of Paris. I toured the Vouvray vineyard 30 years ago, last time I was in France. And they make a wide variety of white wines. They grow a lot of different varietals there. They make still wines. They make sparkling wines. The one we're trying right now is a Chenin Blanc, which is...
I think we've had a Chenin Blanc or two over the last 5 years.
We have. And this is a tough grape to grow because a lot of years the sugar doesn't develop fully within the grape, and so the French have to use a method called chaptalization, which is where they add sugar to the wine to increase the fermentation process. It's not to make the wine sweeter, it's to give the yeast something to turn into alcohol. So if the grape doesn't fully develop all the sugar that it needs to convert into alcohol during the fermentation process, that's when they add the sugar.
I got that, by the way, as soon as I took my first sip. There's definitely a little bit more sugar aspect to this.
Well, this is an off-dry style, so it is going to be a little sweeter than everything else we've had tonight. But again, that's not from them adding sugar to the wine. That's just that's them trying to make a wine that has, to kind of balance out the acidity of the wine.
I mean, it's still a sweeter wine than I generally would be attracted to, but it's certainly better than a Chardonnay. And at the same time, I think there's an aspect of this flavor that I'm going to classify it as a slow sipper rather than a little bit faster sipper like our first two rosés. But this is still a very interesting wine. Very interesting.
My initial reaction to drinking an off-dry wine, and this one especially, is I would serve this after dinner. Not that it's overly sweet. There are certainly dessert wines that are much sweeter than this. But one of the recommended pairings for this was actually shellfish, which would mean you would serve this before the meal. If you're doing oysters.
In no way do I want to say this is an overly sweet wine, because
No.
even though I've said it's sweeter than the three that we've tasted, it is not an overly sweet wine at all. And as people know, Bobby P don't like his overly sweet wines. This is certainly a white that I would certainly throw in the mix if we were doing like an all-white wine evening.
Yeah, it's great to change up the pace. If you're doing a lot of New Zealand-style Sauvignon Blancs that are really acidic, we've got a lot of grapefruit, a lot of bite to them. This is a great way to just change things up and say, hey, you know what? Let's try something a little sweeter, just a touch sweeter. Doesn't have as much of a bite to it.
And as Jim will go into shortly, I mean, there's one thing about French wines is, I mean, don't get me wrong, they make a lot of great wines here in this country, California, Washington, but the history in so many of these vineyards, like the Hugo, they've been making wine since 1639 in the family. I mean, how do you compete with that sometimes? I mean, it's just a generation after generation of individuals have been making wine on this piece of land.
And they get very creative with this too. There are years where in Vouvray, they can't bottle the wine because of what I was talking about earlier, where the grapes don't develop enough sugar. What happened historically was, they were dumping a ton of sugar in there. And then in 1907, the French government stepped in and said, you know what, you're ruining the characteristic of the wine, or the true French nature of the wine. So the French government actually started to monitor how much sugar the winemakers were putting into the wine. And so if they couldn't put enough sugar in to bring the wine up to the quality that they wanted to have, they would just change gears and say, you know what, we're going to turn this into a sparkling wine this year. And this is where the Crémant de Loire came from. So that's a sparkling wine from the Loire Valley. And again, it's a dry to off-dry style, but it's a way for them to use those grapes in a different way instead of having to dump the whole batch out.
Yeah.
Because the French government wouldn't let them kind of tinker with it so much. So.
Now, one thing you're probably noticing that we don't have on the table tonight is a bottle of bubbles or champagne. So obviously, Jim and I can't taste 5 or 6 bottles, but we'd never make it home. But I'm interested to hear some of your stories about touring any of the Champagne region, or some of the champagnes that are offered and where you were at.
Well, I did do a whole day trip to the Champagne area.
Oh, you did?
And
That's right.
I was going to save that for our Champagne special.
Oh, jumped ahead.
But I will say this: there are a lot of champagne houses that will let you come in and just do a tour of the basement of the cellars, and then have a little glass of champagne afterwards. And that gets a little pricey after a while, because you're spending 30, 40, 50 euros to do the tour and get a glass of champagne. So what I would suggest is seeking out some of the smaller houses where you can just go in and have a glass if you just want to try what they produce.
And are these still champagnes or sparkling?
Yeah, no, this is all from the Champagne area. So there are 2 towns in the Champagne area that house most of the big champagne manufacturers. It's Epernay and Reims. We toured Taittinger and Mums, which are both in Reims. Veuve Clicquot is also in Reims. Unfortunately, they were closed the day we were there, so I was really looking forward to that tour. Didn't get to do it, but I'll have to go back. But if you go to Epernay, that's where the majority of the houses are, and they actually have a street called Avenue de Champagne. And you can just walk down that avenue and cross the street and hit every major champagne house in the area.
That sounds like a tough life.
It's a long day, let me tell you.
Well, it's funny because this coming December will be our 6th show if we decide to go with bubbles or champagne. Do
We have to.
I
We
mean,
have to.
I think we still stick with the bubble champagne show for our 6th champagne show or bubble show, whatever you want to call it. We always get into the discussion: is it bubbles? Is it sparkling? Is it champagne? But do we stick to a champagne? Or do we mix it up?
Absolutely, yeah. No, and we've focused on champagne some years, and we've focused on cava and prosecco in other years. And I don't see a reason to change that tradition.
Yeah, I can't either. I'm trying to think of a reason, but
there's so much great champagne out there.
It is.
Why would you want to do that?
There is. That's actually, he did not get a chance to bring anything back because it's kind of difficult to travel with wine in Europe.
Well, and the other thing was last time I was over there, you could actually carry the wine onto the plane with you. So I brought back 3 bottles, which was what the limit was at the time, and just carried it on the plane. Now, these days, you've got to check it. And I actually saw a woman at the airport who had brought a bottle in her bag and it got broken. So she was at the airport dumping everything out of her bag into the trash can, shaking out the glass. It was a mess. Yes, and that was the moment I had landed in Paris, and I decided, you know what, I'm not bringing anything home.
Yeah, it's one of those unfortunate situations where you might be able to get the wine at a cheaper cost because you're buying it at the location, but then when you factor in the shipping cost, the special luggage charge, or if you're going to buy, they do have suitcases where you can transport it.
I actually looked
You're not
at
really
one of
saving
those,
any money. That's the only negative aspect.
Yeah,
of it.
they make a bag you can buy specifically for bringing wine back to the United States, and it's got some compartments for the ice bricks, and it does a great job protecting the wine, but then that's another bag you have to check, and you got to lug that thing all around with you the whole time you're there. So.
Well, Jim was in France, and he wasn't able to attend the mayor's ball with Scott Slifka because, as people know, he's going to be leaving us as the mayor of our wonderful town. And I just want to say, Jim, we missed you.
I'm sorry I wasn't there.
You missed a great event. A lot of money was raised, and it wasn't the same without you. But we tried to tip our glasses with our table, and I think we did a good job.
Well, we're always trying to support the community. So going to events like this, promoting events like this. That's just part of what we do here, and we're happy to do it.
So what do you have coming up in Boston over the next couple months?
We actually have the Grand Rosé tasting coming up. It's 40 or 50 rosés. We do this every year. And
every year
I've invited Bob, and he never comes.
And it's not my fault this time, because we have a poker game we usually play once every couple months with a bunch of guys, and I put it off, and oh, by the way, this is not for money. People are listening on the show, but please, it's not for money. And I've already committed to the game, so I can't yet make another rosé tasting. It bums me out.
The third one in a row.
It is the third one in a row. But you know what? It's probably even going to cost me more money because, oh, that's right, we're not playing for money. Anyways, Jim, so anything else you and the lovely wife plan on doing for summer vacation this year?
Honestly, I think we're vacationed out.
Yeah, I can understand
I hate to say it, but.
Well, one thing you're not vacationed out about, making one of your great porch dinners for me and my lovely wife, Carrie, to come up and eat.
You're invited anytime.
And, I think one of the things I know you were talking about the Portuguese wines, but you just did it, you're coming up doing it?
I just did an industry tasting a week ago. It was all Portuguese wines. It's a lot of wine growers who don't even have distributors here in the United States. And so that's a whole show that I want to do in a month or two. That'll be a topic for the future. So.
Well, once again, Jim, I want to say welcome back home.
Good to be here.
Another great episode with French wines, and everything was really top-notch, and 4 thumbs up all the way across.
Loved everything tonight.
So thanks for joining us, guys. We appreciate your viewership going well into our 5th year. Our 50th show is right here, right now. I'm Bobby P.
I'm James Kimbrough.
And until next time, keep
us
your wine cellar.